Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I made my Tamberlaine the greatest cosplay from the 20-sided Tavern. First things first, I thrifted this green bomber jacket from Depop because I knew I couldn't make this cosplay entirely from scratch. I then put the jacket on a mannequin and took some scrap paper and a pencil and just started tracing the shapes I needed for the velvet panels. And then I cut those pieces out just to make sure that they would look good. Then it was time to use those templates for the velvet panels to actually cut out the velvet panels. I had never used fabric like this before, and I should have known that it was going to be slippery, but for some reason did not expect it to be so slippery. It was very hard to work with. And I didn't realize how slippery this fabric was until I tried to pin it onto the jacket, and I struggled for a while. I was using the mannequin to figure out the exact place that the fabric was supposed to go, but when that didn't work, I said f it and decided to start pinning it on my dining room table. From there, it was much easier to put it on the mannequin and line everything up. If I'm being completely honest, at this moment, I was not sure if this cosplay was going to work out. This cosplay seemed so easy in my head, and I keep looking at it, and I know it's not finished, but everything just looks wrong. Like, the shapes don't look right, everything looks weird. I tried putting on the gold trim to see if the shape would, like, I don't know, sort itself out, but I'm honestly stumped. Look at him. He's mocking me. Anyway, there are 3 techniques I always stand by with cosplaying, and it's hand sewing, trusting the process, and f***ing around and finding out. So keeping that energy in mind, I kept pinning gold trim all along the top of the velvet panels. I did realize that the gold trim didn't hide all of my mistakes though, so I did have to cut some of the jagged velvet edges off after pinning everything in place. It did make a little bit of a mess, but overall it did look so much better. And then it was finally time to start actually hand sewing the trim in place. And then I started repeating that exact same process on the... Wait, what side is that? That's the right side of the jacket. I started repeating the process on the right side of the jacket. And this is why you gotta trust the process, because look at this. I don't know why I was worried. I'm literally doing fine. Now the front panels are done, it's time to work on the sleeves. This was pretty much the same process as the front panels, and once those pieces were cut out, I pinned them in place with the gold trim and then sewed them in place with the gold trim. And you're never gonna believe what I did on the other sleeve. Spoiler alert, it was the exact same thing. Now don't click away, I know this is getting really old, but I did have to do this one more time because I might not be able to see the back of the jacket while I'm wearing it, but other people can. I'm not gonna sugarcoat things and pretend that this process wasn't tedious, but oh my god, it looked so freaking good at the end. I was just figuring out how I wanted to sew these pieces so they would all attach nicely and how I'd sew it so everything looks good, and then I found a hole in the armpit. Editor's note, I actually forgot that was there. I forgot that I filmed this clip. I have to go fix that. Oh! Apparently I also forgot that I did already fix it. Yay! That's good! So as I'm sure you've noticed, the black velvet panels don't connect yet. I wanted to connect those at the very end, but for now, here's me pinning them out of the way. And the reason why I wanted to do that at the very end is because I have to add some ribbons and a lot more gold trim, and those pieces are going to be tucked under the black velvet. This part of the jacket needed burgundy ribbon, thick gold trim, silver ribbon, and a different type of gold trim. And I pinned these ribbons and the gold trim onto the front and back of the jacket. And then it was time for, you guessed it, more hand sewing. I know that sounds like I'm complaining, I promise I'm not. I hand sew plushies for a living, I love hand sewing. But I will be honest, the gold trim that I was working with was really rough and it did kind of hurt my fingers to sew with it constantly. So, I don't know, maybe the secret to having nice exfoliated hands is cosplaying a character that has a lot of gold trim on their outfit. And hand sewing all of the gold trim in place. And once I finished sewing the ribbons and gold trim onto the front of the jacket, it was time to sew all of the ribbons and gold trim onto the back of the jacket. I will admit, I made a couple of mistakes here, but I ran out of ribbon and couldn't redo the panels, and luckily, Tamberlaine has a flannel wrapped around their waist, so I knew that those mistakes would be covered. This cosplay has a lot of really tiny hand-sewn details, so it's like I always say in my other videos, if you can see the mistakes on my cosplay, you're standing way too close to me. Now, this is the part of the cosplay I was honestly the most nervous about. It was time for me to add the gold trim to the sleeves. I was worried because I was sewing these onto a pre-made jacket, so I wasn't sure if I was going to mess up the spacing, or if the lines were going to get wonky, or if things just weren't going to look right. I also didn't know that this jacket was going to have a pocket on one of the sleeves, and I was really determined to make sure that it was still functional. But overall, everything ended up looking really good, and I was really glad to be done working with this gold trim for a while because it really hurt my fingers, but I am happy to report I do still have my fingerprints. I'm also happy to report that that pocket I was worried about does still function, and while I haven't used it yet, I think it'd be perfect for dice storage. Now, I told you I was gonna come back to this later. Thank you for trusting the process. It was finally time to finish up the black velvet panels. To make this process easier and a little less overwhelming, I once again worked in sections and started with the front. And then I sewed those pieces in place. Then I moved on to the sleeve. And then I sewed those pieces in place. And here's actual footage of me losing a fight against thread. Then I moved on to the back of the jacket. Because as I've said before, I may not be able to see the back of the jacket, but other people will be able to see the back of the jacket. And finally, I pinned the gold trim onto the other sleeve, being very mindful of that little pocket I mentioned before. And finally, I sewed that gold trim in place. Now, I was very excited to be done sewing gold trim, but I wasn't done sewing yet. It was time to make the detachable cape. I took my green velvet and added pins where each of my shoulders were so I knew exactly how wide the top of the cape needed to be. Then I kind of cut the cape into a trapezoid shape. And I didn't realize that I didn't film this part because my camera fell down and I didn't realize that it stopped recording when I picked it back up. But it looked a little something like this, and I did clean up the sides later to make them more even. Then I grabbed some snaps and I sewed the snaps in place, and I also hemmed the top of the cape. And once that was done, I sewed the snaps onto the jacket. And I gotta be so real, I was really excited about this cape. Now, I was a little worried because Tamberlaine has epaulettes, and I've never made those before, but apparently you can use a bra insert to make your pattern. Now, I watched a lot of tutorials on this before I got started, and everyone was using foam, but I didn't have foam. And I've never used foam before, so I didn't really want to invest in it for this cosplay. So instead, I used this leftover gold pleather that I had from my Victor cosplay, and you know what? It was perfect. I thought it'd be easier to paint the epaulettes before I sewed them, so this is me painting them. I know that these epaulettes don't look exactly like the ones in the show, but reference pictures were pretty limited, so I just kept it pretty basic. Personally, I thought they turned out really cute, but if one day I decide that they're not cute, I can always remake them. I let the paint dry overnight, and then I started sewing the darts, and then I added a snap right where the epaulette would meet my shoulder. And then I repeated that process on the second epaulette, and then I sewed some snaps onto the shoulders of the jacket so the epaulettes could be snapped into place. And I am glad that I added snaps to this cosplay because one, like I said earlier, if I decide that the epaulettes aren't cute, I can always replace them. And two, it's gonna make this cosplay so much easier to clean. Now, unless I decide to make myself a hat of shame or a hat of celebration or something, the sewing portion of this cosplay is completely done. But we're not entirely done because Tamberlaine has a little gem on their zipper. So I got out the resin kit, and luckily my resin kit came with these little metal pieces that were perfect for the bezel. I put down a thin layer of UV resin and then covered that layer in this chunky orange glitter that had a green shift. And I was gonna let that cure, but my lamp decided to not cooperate. Sometimes my portable charger is enough to power it up, sometimes it's not. Anyway, I had to move the project to my bathroom. Once I cured that first layer of resin, I added another layer of resin that was thicker to just encase everything and make it all pretty. I did end up with a couple of air bubbles, but honestly, I don't care. This is exactly what I had in mind. I think it's perfect. And finally, I just took some pliers and a jump ring and attached that to the zipper, and the cosplay was done. I could not be happier with the way that this turned out. I think it turned out so freaking cool. And I think the reaction I had when I tried it on for the first time just really speaks for itself. And then a month later, I actually got to wear this to the 20-sided tavern, and I had the best time. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please remember to like and subscribe so you can see more of my shenanigans, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!
Hi, I'm in the vlog.